Okay, I'll kick it over to you, Lee and Casey. Oh, we got Nicole
Okay.
joining us right now, so good timing.
Oh, good.
Probably have to type in that that link again.
Oh, God. That is just so ridiculous. I want to share a file, but it's like not going in for some reason.
And
Hmm.
presenters, just so you're aware, I'm gonna kind of sit behind the scenes and I'll mute myself and turn my video off. But as we change presenters, I will highlight the video for the recording. So just
Okay. All right. Well, I just cannot figure this out, so I'm just going to go with it. Well, and now I've made this too small. Sorry, everyone. Okay. All right. So welcome, everyone. That link will take you to the slides that Casey and I are going to walk through today to kind of help you just kind of get a good introduction to Willamette Promise, some of the resources that we have. And are you also seeing nothing? Okay, thank God. What is happening today? Oh, this is terrible. Welcome. Yes. So you probably heard last week when we met, but we'll say it again. I'm Lee Graziano. I'm an associate professor of English at Western Oregon, and I'm the director of first year writing. So I coordinate 121 and 122 on our campus and our instructors, and for Willamette Promise. And then Casey, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Casey Moreland, and I'm a visiting assistant professor at Western Oregon, and this is my second year working with the Willamette Promise. Yeah, I guess that's pretty much it.
Okay, so one of the things that I do want to draw your attention to, if you haven't been there yet, is that our teacher's guide with a lot of material about both portfolios, the requirements. It's got a combination of information for teachers and resources, all your assignment prompts, in-class activities, recommended readings. That's all going to be at this website, willamettepromisewriting.org. Okay. And
hey Lee, just FYI, sorry, we're seeing your new teacher onboarding your argument as conversation.
oh, for God's sakes.
Just FYI.
Why? All right, hold on.
Are your multiple screens sabotaging you now?
They may be.
You were so excited about that.
I know. All right, let me try again here. Oh goodness, what a mess. Okay. Let's do it this way. Okay. We'll try again. Okay, I'm not going to put it in present mode, and I think that will help. So you're all seeing Willamette Promise Teacher's Guide now, right? Yes? Okay. So this is where you want to go to get everything for your Willamette Promise courses. So if I take you there really quick, for example, you'll see that you'll get an overview of material about the program, each portfolio, and I think the section where most of our teachers spend their time is under resources. particularly the documents page. That's where you're going to find all your assignment prompts, the rubrics. If you're looking to make your syllabi, I just posted blank Google Doc version, so you can make a copy for yourself, put all your information in, and have it good to go for your students. Right, readings that you can do. I've added a new card that Casey and I are going to work on building with online research locations for students, because right now you can't benefit from going to the libraries at Western or another college near you. So right now I have the guide that our librarians made that will point you to some open access journals and databases and libraries, other places where students can find those required academic scholarly sources. And so Casey and I will keep brainstorming to add other resources there to help your students do research while we are in our pandemic protocol. So anyways, this is the place you want to bookmark so that you can stop into this website as often as you need to. There's a lot of material on there, and we update and add to it pretty regularly. You'll also find a bunch of sample student papers on here as well that you're welcome to share with students. Okay, and then we're going to dig into a lot of the content of our kind of overview for the program now. And so what I will say is please interrupt Casey or I anytime if you have questions, and we're happy to do that as we go instead of saving them all for the end. So just feel free to raise your hand or wave your hand wildly in front of the screen, and we'll stop so that we can make sure you have a good sense of what you're doing. All right, Casey, just let me know when you want me to move to the next slide.
Okay, sure. You can go ahead and move. So really what you're doing with the Willamette Promise is helping students get to a space of understanding college level reading and writing. In the history of first year writing, it was actually started so that students would be proficient. So it started at Harvard, and yeah, so that's kind of the goal of first year writing, is to ensure that students are able to do this type of reading and writing and critical thinking. And so that's really what the portfolios are going to show us. And it's a proficiency based model that we use. So just to show that students are proficient in these things. Some of the things that the students will learn, and these are things that you know that you'll assist the students with, is understanding a clear purpose, an audience when writing, and understanding different genres and different expectations that audience expect for a different genre. Students should be able to control matters of style to suit a particular rhetorical purpose, audience, and genre. And there should be depth of reflection and capability of expressing the implications of one subject. So how much do the students learn, how much could they transfer to another space, and really what they're able to take away and how they're able to reflect on their writing process. The next slide, please, Lee. So the focus on argument as conversation and research as inquiry. This is pretty specific to first year writing. So you're going to, instead of students just having an analysis for the sake of an analysis, they're going to enter into other conversations so that they're contributing to a conversation or looking more critically at a conversation going on about a particular topic. They're going to engage in issues and ideas through this conversation thoughtfully. And research is really an aspect of inquiry rather than research to support a previously conceived of idea. So a student says, oh, well, I'm going to argue that everyone should have a gun, and that isn't really, and then they find the research that supports their argument, rather than going in and having a research question, and really seeing what the research tells them to go back and then craft an argument. So research as inquiry is really important in this regard. And then information literacy is really important as well. So helping students understand how to find information, how to do the research, how to evaluate sources for credibility and authority, how to synthesize information from multiple sources, using sources to support their claims, and learning citation styles and signaling to distinguish their voice from the voice of others. So these are a few of the aspects specific to college level writing that might be different that you'll help the students achieve throughout the term or however you're going to do your portfolio for the final product.
Okay, so let's hit a little bit of kind of the absolute sort of minimum you need to do as a Willamette Promise teacher. Okay, starting off, you need to distribute the writing surveys. So the pre-survey, right, should happen before students do their on-demand. And the post-survey should happen after they have finished with their final essay. But they should do that one before they do the reflection, for example. So they should do that kind of between the end of the paper when they've got their final version and they're starting to work on the reflective letter, which is the last thing they'll work on in the portfolio. You will choose 2 of the topics and the accompanying readings for students in your class to write about. Some teachers do this, our teachers tend to do this 2 ways. One way is we have some teachers who just look at the list and the readings and they pick the topics and they say, this is it, this is what I want to do, and these are the only 2 topics you're choosing from. Other teachers like to give students all of the topics and let them vote. And whichever 2 topics get the most votes, those are the topics your class focuses on. So you're welcome to do it however you want, but you're responsible for selecting 2 of those topics, which we'll kind of go over shortly, for your students to focus on for their on-demands and then their research projects. Okay, so the whole class is working from the same 2 topics, the big umbrella topics. You'll determine the time frame for students to write those on-demand essays. And that will either happen in class, if you want to use class time, depending on how you are meeting with your students this year, or if you're using the Canvas shells that we talked about in our last meeting, it's the same thing. You're just going to set the due dates for when students need to turn in their initial pieces. We tend to tell teachers that each essay, students probably need 2 to 3 hours to work on, and we're looking for them to produce probably 2 to 3 pages as well for each on-demand. And that's not like a hard and fast limit, that's just to give you a rough estimate of what the ballpark is. You should read the on-demands without grading them. We treat those as they're exploratory essays, and we treat them as a kind of pre-writing, right? So students, this isn't a polished essay. They're being asked to get their initial thoughts on paper, their initial ideas, their questions. And so we encourage you to read them and give feedback on them, but not to grade them, just to give students some direction in which of these 2 topics seems like the best avenue for them to move forward with for their portfolios. Okay. You should provide prompts, moments, opportunities for reflection from start to finish. So this is one area where I think our new teachers sometimes struggle and our students struggle. So the very last thing students work on is the reflection letter. If the only time students are sitting down to reflect on what they have learned and who they are as a writer is at the very end, once they've been given that assignment prompt, those reflective letters tend to be extremely weak because reflection is a habit. It's something that we do regularly. It is a very frequent and very structured activity that happens on our on-campus courses. Our students reflect regularly. Almost every class period, I have students reflect on something. So we would encourage you to provide opportunities for students to reflect on what they are learning as they go. Every major milestone, have them reflect. Some teachers in the past have done reflection journals. Students regularly keep a journal with regular reflections on what they learned from this activity, what goals they have for the next activity. All of this material will be really helpful for students when they get to the end and they're working on that reflective letter. You should provide appropriate amounts of research opportunities and guidance based on the needs of your students. There's no correct answer here. We have to meet our students where they are, and some of our students need more than others, right? So depending on what your students need, what they have, you want to make sure that they have enough support for finding sources, making sure that they have the right number of scholarly sources that are required for them to be eligible for college credit with their portfolios, that they're choosing sources that make sense for their arguments, that are the most persuasive that they can work with, etc. This one may be tricky depending on how you're delivering the course, but you do want to model for students how to give good peer feedback. Peer review is a staple of an on-campus college writing course. My students peer review every paper at least once in small groups with their peers. So they should learn strategies from you to do revision, to do something more than just fix where the commas are, which is my students' favorite activity to do during peer review, is move those commas around, right? So they do need to learn revision activities. They should learn how to give feedback to their peers, right? And they should be allowed to decide for themselves what feedback they want to move forward with, just like we let them do on campus. They're the authors of their paper. They get to decide what feedback is helpful for them, for the goals and the message they're trying to deliver. You can give feedback using either. I have formative written here. Some of our teachers like the formative rubric. Some of our teachers find it more helpful to use the summative rubric because that's the one that we use to give credit to students. So some teachers find it more helpful to just use that rubric the whole time and to circle on the official rubric that we use to score the portfolio so that students are seeing at every draft how their portfolio is developing. It doesn't matter to us either way, whether you use the formative rubric or the summative one. You can pick. But I'll tell you that I think a lot of our teachers have started using the summative rubric more often. You should provide guidance. Again, for that reflective letter is the last thing students do. It's been newly revised. We worked on it last spring. We rewrote that together as a large group. And so that's the last thing that they'll work on, is making an argument to tell us, the readers, what they have learned about themselves as writers and what they have learned about writing itself. Those are kind of the two focuses of the reflective letter. As a Willamette Promise teacher, you're responsible for reading the portfolios that your students have, submitting only the ones that you deem to be passing. So a 1 or better, right? If it's not at least a 1, you don't upload it. It's a non-passing portfolio, and scoring them using that summative rubric. So you, as the Willamette Promise teacher, you are the one that determines whether your students get college credit and what letter grade is going on that transcript. We put that responsibility entirely on you as the person who that knows your student and has read their work extensively throughout the, your time delivering the course. And then you're responsible for cross-scoring a percentage of the portfolios that other teachers have submitted. This is an activity that we use purely for our own assessment and betterment. It has no bearing on the students. Their scores are already submitted. So for example, if the classroom teacher has already given the student a 3 and they got an A, and you read the portfolio and you're like, this is garbage, this is a 1, it's a C, that's fine. You can mark it a 1, you can give it a C, it has no impact on the student. They've already gotten an A. We use that to focus on right? How well are we scoring? Are we scoring similarly? Where are areas that we can improve? We use this as a learning activity. So don't stress about it is all I'm saying. Your score isn't going to harm the teacher or the student. We use it for learning. Okay. I'm going to pause before I move into the portfolio itself and the process of kind of moving students through the portfolio, and just see, are there any questions yet that you want to hit? There's no pressure. You can save them all to the end if you want. Okay, cool. Then I'm just going to keep going. Okay, so this is everything that the Willamette Promise portfolio has to contain, right? These are all the requirements. Students have a reflective letter. They have the 2 on-demand pieces that they write in class, or this year potentially online because of COVID. An annotated bibliography. They need to include at least 1 draft. We don't care what draft it is. It can be the first draft, the third draft, it doesn't matter, but a draft of that argument paper with your feedback on it. Not peers' feedback, your feedback. You can, many of our teachers, what they'll do is a combination of, they tack the rubric on, they highlight the categories on the rubric, and then they add some comments at the end for students, right? So we want to see 1 draft that has your feedback and either the formative or the summative rubric, whichever one you've used in to give feedback, that should go in the portfolio. Then we'll have the final argument paper, the polished version, and both pre and post surveys. That's everything that has to be in the portfolio. None of these things can be missing. Yeah, go ahead. Was that a question or just, yeah?
No, it was a question. And I apologize in advance if my dogs begin to bark quite loudly.
Totally fine.
I'm wondering about the draft with comments. So given that we're exclusively online, I mean, what I've had my kids do is I do like a Google Doc, and then I'll give comments in the comment section. Is that something that would count for a kid?
Yep. The only tricky part with Google Docs is that I don't know, when you save it as a PDF, I don't think it saves your comments. So for our Google teachers, the super annoying workaround is you need to download the Google Doc as a Word doc. Then it'll turn all your comments into track changes, and then you can use that one to upload into the portfolio. It's very annoying, but it's the only workaround we've come up with.
The only other thing that I've ever done is just to put my comments in the document itself, but in a color, and I don't know. Yep. Either way will work.
Yep, either is fine. We have lots of teachers that do that give digital feedback. I always give digital feedback myself, and so that's 100% fine. Mm-hmm. All right. Okay, so step 1 are choosing those topics and the readings for your students. So we made a change to how we do this. Right now, we have kind of these big umbrella topics, and there are 2 or 3 readings that we provide for each topic. Those readings are meant to be super provocative, because the point is to get students interested and thinking and responding, right? Oh my goodness, I agree with that. I hate that. I have these questions. I would want to look into this next. That's what the on-demand should sound like. It's an exploratory essay, not an argue. They shouldn't have a thesis, in other words. They're really just responding to the ideas that they've read and what they want to do or know next, right? So they're really meant to encourage them to branch out. Students ultimately can refine their argument to anything they want as long as it fits under that umbrella category. So we like this because it gives you and your students way more flexibility with their topics and to be more original with their topics than our older model, which really boxed students into either I'm totally for this issue or I'm totally against this issue. And we wanted to avoid them thinking that way because there's no issue that's that black and white, right? So students should read and annotate those readings. They can do that in class if you want to use class time for that. Some teachers like to do that, or they can read them outside of class. It can be homework and they spend time reading them. Either is fine. It just really, again, depends on how you want to do it and what you think your students need. And then you schedule time for those on-demand essays, right? Whether you're going to do that in class with them. And again, I think most teachers find that that takes 2 to 3 hours per essay if you're doing that in class, or you can have them do that online through Canvas or your Google Classroom if you're delivering this more digitally this time. And these are our topics. All of the topics and the readings are on the website. Okay, so like once you decide which ones you want to do, you'll find all the readings for you are on the website. They're all hyperlinked there to the 2 or 3 articles for each reading are there. And again, as you can imagine with, say, criminal justice right now, there's a lot of things happening in the world, right, that students could narrow into a topic that fits under an umbrella of criminal justice. So our hope is that it allows students to argue lots of different things. And I can tell you, having looked at some of the portfolios that came in this last spring, which was the first year doing these new topics, I was so excited and so impressed by the original ideas that our students were pursuing under these umbrellas and how different the papers were. It was so refreshing from previous years where I felt like I read like 50 of the same paper, right? So it's really okay for students to branch out as long as they fit under this umbrella for whatever 2 topics that you pick. Okay, so again, this is the student's starting point. This is a pre-writing kind of essay. Each one we're looking to be about 2 to 3 pages. It is not a big deal if it's a little bit less than that. It's not a big deal if it's more than that. It's just the ballpark. It's the average of what students tend to produce and turn in. The essay is exploratory, so you shouldn't grade it, right? They shouldn't have a thesis. The prompt does not encourage them to have a thesis. The point is for them to respond to things in the reading, right? Questions they have, things that are really interesting to them, things they might want to look into later. So it's not necessary that students address the central argument of each reading, right? This is really an open space where they can respond to things they like, they dislike, they agree with, they don't agree with, and other things that they might want to look into, as long as they are grappling with kind of things that fit under that umbrella topic, right? And their hope is that then you'll work with students to choose which of those 2 topics that they might have the best idea for, that they should move forward with, that they feel most passionate about. And students can choose by themselves, but you can help them. You can have them do some peer feedback on those on-demand. Any of that advice can help students decide which of those 2 directions to develop their portfolio on. Right, and again, at this point, your job is to read as a reader, not as a judge or an editor, just to help students figure out where's your passion, where's some of the most interesting stuff you've got going on that would be really cool to move forward with. That's the only point to this on-demand portion of the portfolio. Okay, then everything that comes after that is students have picked one of those 2 pieces, and now they're going to move towards that polished argument essay. And so the first thing that I would encourage you to work on with students is research questions. So again, what we're trying to get students away from doing and what they have learned to do, because I mostly work with freshmen, so I see this a lot, right? Students have learned to start with a thesis statement and shape everything else from that. And we really want to break them of that habit. And we want them to start instead from a place of inquiry and start with a question. What is your question? What is it that you want to know, right? And so we want them to start with a question and start researching that question and finding sources for their annotated bibliography, again, based on that guiding research question. It is only once students have done a bunch of research that we want to see them have a working thesis statement that's informed by what they've read. Otherwise, they're just giving me their preconceived idea, right? I already believe this, so this is what I'm arguing. We want to try to push them away from that, okay? So they should work on their first draft. I would encourage you, as I think I have here, for students to go through 2 to 3 drafts of their research paper before they get to that polished one that's going to be in their portfolio. So if you as you're planning, I would plan for 2 or 3 drafts from students. You can do more, certainly, but I would hit at least 2 to 3. They should have plenty of opportunities to workshop their drafts with peers. Some teachers like to do conferences with students, which again, you can do digitally. You can do that in small groups, depending on how you're doing it, right? I would say all the way up to right before they're going to turn in a polished version for the portfolio. I would encourage you to focus more on global feedback than surface level errors, unless there's like a real bad pattern that students have that's impacting meaning. Most students need that kind of global feedback on their content and their argument and their thesis and their evidence, and you can save a lot of that other stuff until the end. You do have access to Grammarly. I believe that's still true. So students can run their paper through Grammarly for plagiarism, which is a helpful check. They also can make free student accounts that are completely free to them. They're their own personal accounts, and that lets them also run their paper through for sentence level errors. You can let them do a lot of their own editing. I'll tell you that in my classes, I don't ever address grammar when I respond to students' papers. The only time I comment on grammar is if students have a pattern of errors. I'll let them know so that they can learn and focus on that pattern, or if their errors are so bad that it's impacting my ability as a reader to understand. Otherwise, grammar is not something that my first year writing program particularly emphasizes. Okay, so here's a good little check that we've kind of learned over the years. The finished essay, the one that's in the portfolio, should look pretty significantly different from the on-demand. If it looks pretty similar to the on-demand, that should be a flag for you about whether or not this is a passing portfolio, right? So we should see a lot of growth from that initial piece. When we have seen portfolios that have had very little growth, they have either been non-passing or barely passing portfolios. So that is, it's a good checkpoint for yourself, is that whatever the final piece is, it should look pretty different from what it started out as. Students will do their post-writing survey at this point in the process, right? Recheck their writing confidence. I find that it's helpful to sometimes let students know that it's okay to score themselves lower in their post-writing surveys than they did in their pre-writing surveys. Lots of students will realize that they maybe came in a little too hot and they had more confidence than they maybe should have had. And by the end of the course, they've learned, actually, they've marked it as less confidence because they've realized how much more complicated it is than they previously thought. And that's a great thing to write about in their reflective letter. So it's something I tell students because I also do a pre-post writing confidence survey with my students. And I'll always tell them that, like, that's not a sign that you aren't passing this course. That's actually a sign that you've learned something, right? That's a great sign. That's a good thing for us to see. And then the very last thing they'll work on is that reflective essay, where they're going to tell me about their knowledge of themselves as writers, who they are as a writer, what they've learned about their strengths and their weaknesses, where they're confident, where they're not confident, what goals they have for the future, and what they have learned about writing itself, about the nature of making arguments, about using sources, about the value of drafting, right? Writing knowledge. They should, like they would for any kind of piece of writing, they should quote themselves using the pieces in their portfolio as evidence. So they might say, quote something from their rough draft and compare it to something they quote from their final draft to say, I want to talk about how my argument has really evolved, right? So they should actually cite themselves as evidence. They're not going to use outside sources. They're going to use their own writing. And they can draw on all those wonderful little reflections you've had them do throughout the course. All of that material can help students in writing this final letter. And they're welcome to draw on any of that material in that final piece, which is why it is so important for you to make reflection a regular habit that students do throughout your course, where they set goals, they describe what happened and what they learned and why it matters, and kind of do it all over again. It is perhaps, I mean, perhaps and really only in my opinion, but just for how long I've been teaching first year writing, I think reflection is one of the most important skills that we teach students, is stopping to think about what have I learned, why does it matter, how can I use it later, is actually taking time to process what we have learned is really valuable. Otherwise, students will get caught up and sometimes not realize everything that they've accomplished. So it's something that we really do want to take quite a lot of time to incorporate into our courses. Okay, whew, that's the whole spiel. All right, I'm gonna stop sharing and then let us answer your questions or talk about resources you might need, help you might like, any or all of that would be great. Questions?
And Lee, just a couple comments before
Yes.
you dive in.
Great.
I put
Great.
the link in the chat to download the Chrome extension for
Awesome.
printing comments. A lot of times if
Perfect.
folks have like DOPDF or something like that, you can just kind of save those comments pretty easily. Then for Grammarly, we haven't yet updated accounts for this year, but you'll receive your
Okay.
email invite soon. So just a couple things.
Perfect.
I had a few questions for you.
Great.
First, with the most practical ones, have we established the cost for kids to register before turning in their portfolio to attain college credit?
It's still $30, isn't it, Adam?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that one. So, yep,
Okay.
$30 transcription fee. So that's not per course, that's not per credit. It's just an annual fee. Students on free and reduced lunch can be scholarshiped as long as they fill out. It's not published yet. We usually go live with payment stuff in October-ish, middle of October-ish, but there will be a scholarship that lives online for students on free and reduced lunch.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and
then
just to be clear, Macklin, so if a student is enrolled in your course and down the hall with Miss Lentz in Spanish, they'd only pay $30 one time. Last year we did have a COVID hardship as well. I'm not sure if our board will continue that practice, so we'll keep you updated on that as well.
Okay, sounds good. And then the other part of that, are there due dates yet for the portfolios? If like my structure, if I'm going to have them due through the first 2 quarters, is there a cutoff date?
I can take that one too.
Yep.
Great question. And this is something to think about too, for all of you as you sort of structure your year. We're a unique program in the sense that we're an assessment-based learning program. We're the only assessment-based learning program in the state, and it provides us with a ton of flexibility in the sense that we don't work in the dual credit world, like other models of dual credit that have to articulate coursework according to fall term, winter term, spring term, etc. We don't have add drop dates. We don't have withdrawals. And so everything for us is due at the end of the year. So I think Katie has a draft calendar for this year, but it's usually about the middle of June that we ask you to start, or beginning of June that we actually ask you to start checking in the portfolios into our system. The portfolios, how we collect them from you, the teacher, and Lee and Casey just kind of outline the artifacts in them, that they come to us as a single page PDF. So that's something to be aware of as you're kind of putting these pieces together. And there's some work that goes into making those into a single page PDF, but that's how we have to keep them on file. And so the question that you asked, Macklin's a good one, because if you have students finishing up at January, I would encourage you at the least, make sure those students have paid their fee, because you're not going to see them again, right? So, and we'll do more trainings later on in the system, but you actually have access to that information in your OrSkills account that we'll train you on in the fall, to actually seeing which students have paid or not, which is really handy. But I would strongly encourage you, even though at that point I wouldn't say go ahead and do your cross scoring and upload those portfolios, but I would encourage you to maybe organize the portfolios and start thinking about creating those single page PDFs. Then also just really start to track student payment, since you're not going to see those students again. But other than that, all of that uploading of the student artifacts and the cross scoring and all of that stuff doesn't happen until later on in the spring.
Okay.
That's kind of a long answer, but it's kind of a strategic way to approach your year as you're working with students in semesters.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Last thing I got here, first is like just I know I've seen it before and I can go find it, but the structural differences between 121 and 122 and the actual portfolio. And then a little more abstractly, which is kind of a larger conversation, I'm having a little difficulty kind of differentiating what actual classwork would be different between those two, because our format here, I'm going to have both those students in the same class at the same time. So wondering, the first, like the concrete, how's the portfolio different, and then success you've had in teaching 122 kids.
Okay, yeah, so the portfolio artifacts themselves are exactly the same for 121 and 122. The only difference is in the annotated bibliographies, the length and required number of sources, and in the final research paper, again, in terms of length and number of required sources. So for 122, we're looking for both of those things to be longer and more in-depth and use more scholarly peer-reviewed sources than we are in 121. But you can definitely, and many of our teachers have quite successfully done a combination of 121 and 122 portfolios in the same class, because it's the same process. And so you're teaching students the same skills, right? You're teaching them the same stuff. You're teaching them how to brainstorm, how to refine their topics, how to research, how to work their arguments. The only difference is really in the length and the depth that we expect to see in 122 versus 121. The other difference, if you look at the rubrics for scoring, 121 and 122 have their own summative rubrics, because a 3 in 121 is really only a 2 in 122, right? So the 122 rubric, the 3 category, is even more advanced than what we expect to see in the 121 course. So those rubrics can also help you in guiding students on their drafts and their revisions, because we are expecting quite a bit more for students to get those A's and B's in 122 than we are in 121.
Okay.
Does that help?
It does. And then can I vocalize to make sure that I'm understanding something as well here?
Yep,
that
please.
120, if a student goes for 122, I determine the portfolio is not quite there. Can they resubmit it then for 121 and try to get the credit there?
Ooh, that's a good question. I have no idea. Do we do that, Adam?
Yeah, and like part of it is just kind of making the distinction that they need to earn the 121 credit prior to 122 because that is a prerequisite, but also the portfolio process is going to be different. So when a student transitions to 122, they're effectively starting over. So you're selecting
Yeah.
new readings and starting the process over. I don't know, Macklin, if we've had a ton of scenarios where that happened. I can tell you some scenarios that I have observed, though, that if a student is, in that kind of year-long senior English like you're offering, and during first semester they tackled the 121 portfolio and fall short, it's not uncommon to have them attempt it again second semester while the kids who earn credit in writing 121 are going after 122 now. That's a scenario that we've seen a couple times.
But
Okay.
they do have to redo the portfolio with a different topic.
Yep, correct.
Yeah.
And were you saying, are the readings, those selections there, those 10 on Willamette Promise, is that the same for 121 and 122?
Yep, same readings, same topics for them to choose from, but they have to choose, they can't do their portfolios on the same topic.
Right.
So if you have a student that earns 121 on criminal justice, they can't do 122 on criminal justice.
Okay. And then last question concerning those. 121 gets you 4 credit hours for an Oregon university, but you still need 122 to satisfy writing. If you get 122, it's still 4 hours, but then you don't need to take any more writing classes from an Oregon university. Is that correct?
It may depend on the university a little bit. At Western, that's certainly true. 121 and 122 are required on Western. I do think some schools, I want to say PSU has a second year writing requirement, but it should fulfill the first year requirements for any public school. I think we sorted that out. Is that true, Adam?
Yeah, that's generally correct. It's hard to make statements that are like all encompassing, we've learned. But generally those two courses will be direct equivalents at other public schools and will count as 121 and 122, which would satisfy sort of your core competency requirements.
Yeah.
And those units you get from 121, when I look, if I'm a student, I look at my college transcript, will it just be like general units then, if it's not satisfying the writing intensive part? Or is it just saying I have 121 and that's what they're going to see on their transcript?
Yeah, they show up as just normal credit. So the student that earns 121 with you gets a WU transcript with 121 on it. It does have an ABL notation, just that kind of notes that the credit was earned via the assessment-based learning model at a high school, but it is a WU transcript with those courses. As far as transferability goes, because that has been an issue in the past, but to our knowledge, unless anyone has changed their policies, these credits would transfer to all 16 Oregon community colleges and all public universities and satisfy writing requirements.
Yep.
Again, unless something has changed this year, as of last year, that statement was correct.
Okay, thanks, y'all.
Oh, you're muted. Yeah.
I'm unmuted now. I have a couple of questions. One
Okay, great.
is, it's sort of a brave new world for all of us. And I've said this before, I've been teaching for 23 years and now I feel like a first year teacher all over again, I am wondering, and maybe Adam can speak to this, if there is, for those of us who are new this year, as I'm kind of working through and figuring things out, if there's a list of teachers who are more veteran 121 teachers that we could maybe reach out to and say, hey, can I bounce this idea, pick up a correspondence? I mean, I know it's different when we're not in a COVID situation and we're all meeting together. Whereas when it's virtual and I'm not sitting at a table with somebody, like I was whenever that was in February, January, something. So I'm wondering if there's a list that I could just, reach out to somebody at Forest Grove and say, hi, I'm Gail. I, am confused or something like that. And then, just ask for tricks of the trade, how do you do this or whatever. And then the other question that I'm wondering is if Lee, if you can talk a little bit more about the on-demand essay. You mentioned like 2-3 hours, I think, but I may have heard that wrong. I teach AP Lit, and so when I teach on-demand essays, it's usually, and you have 45 minutes, go. So I'm wondering how that looks differently. I know there's no thesis involved, but I'm wondering how that on-demand piece looks in terms of timing, especially again with the way classes are. I mean, mine is just, I see kids twice a week now. So
Mhm.
how does that look? Does it need to be proctored, etc.?
Yeah, so okay, so first, I can definitely reach out to our veteran teachers, and I'm very confident I can get a list of people who would be happy to serve as a point person for 121 and 122. Our veteran teachers are super friendly and generous, so we can work on that. Yeah, so the on-demand, I think they do take a little time because, again, we don't want them to be a paragraph. So it does take a little bit of time. I do think most teachers find that it takes about 2 hours per essay. And so that tends to spread out across class periods, depending on how often you see your students. So they might say, write for 45 minutes one day and pause and continue the next time you see them on those essays. A little bit of the tricky part that we have with these on-demand essays and why we have them start in the classroom is concern over parent involvement, which I'm sure you're familiar with. But what we want is to get a sense of the student's authentic voice, not the overeager parent very excited for their student to have college credit and get a jump start on that next degree. Is why we have those happen in class. Obviously, if you're doing this a little more, if you're delivering this more remotely, this is just not a thing that we can stress about this year with COVID. It's just not. I'm not going to lose sleep over it. It is what it is. Like, students will have to sit down. I would tell them to carve out, if you're doing it digitally, I would tell them to carve out 2 to 3 hours at home. I'm like, set a timer, sit down, make sure no one's going to distract you. And when that time is up, right, that's what you want to kind of turn in, right, is give yourself 2 to 3 hours, sit and write, and then turn that in, and to just, again, encourage them that at this point, this is meant to be a shitty first draft, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes I love having them read shitty first drafts, by the way. Students love that piece. But yeah, so it's up to you really how you want to break it up. But I would find that you're probably going to need more than one class period per on-demand for them to have enough time to produce about 2 pages of writing.
So again, with you since this comes so quickly on the heels of the survey, do you how much instruction about it? I mean, do you just kind of direct them, or do you need to, I mean, my instinct is to sort of direct them, not instruct them necessarily, but to really emphasize those elements, because I can help them carve out time in their schedules, and they need to learn how to manage their own outside time anyway. Right. But I'm just wondering, is it more directive and, I really want to hear your thoughts and things like that, or
Yep.
Is there much instruction involved?
I think, so there are assignment instructions on the website that you can give students for on-demand instructions to kind of tell them what they're doing. I think giving them that direction is great. I know, like, when things are normal, the teachers do tend to spend time on each topic in class. So they read topic A together as a class. They spend time talking about the ideas in the readings and what they thought about them, and so the teachers do, when things are normal, again, right, like, it's a little different right now, but when things are normal, they do spend a fair amount of time leading students into each topic, right? Like, let's read these things together, let's have conversations, let's get fired up, and then they have them sit and write. But I think giving them that guidance is great. Like, the point of this is, don't worry about having a thesis. You don't need one. Like,
Right.
do react to the ideas in the readings. What questions do you have? It's okay for an exploratory piece to wander.
Mhm.
This is not a kind of essay where we want to see a super necessarily a rigid or logical organization, right? Like,
Right.
this is a wandering piece,
Right.
right?
Right.
And I think just letting them, giving them the permission to have that freedom to write something very different than the 5-paragraph essay, which is so familiar to them, will be helpful. Because yeah, in college, they're never going to turn in a 5-paragraph essay again,
Yeah.
most likely, right? So,
Right.
yeah.
I use the word divorce quite often
Yes.
with that one. We're divorcing them. But so it is okay. Like I did this last year with my kids, where and it was just kind of carving it out with because I wanted to emphasize inquiry. And so giving them something to read and then sitting down as a class and really hashing it out together. So that's okay to do before the on-demand. Just give them something to read. We dialogue about it. We talk about it, and then they can go off and do their on-demand. Good.
Yep. So like if you picked criminal justice, there's 3 readings there. Your students can read those as homework, and then you guys can come in and you can get hot with those, have a debate. Some students some teachers do that. Have a debate, let them argue, let them get fired up, have that really fruitful discussion. It'll help generate a ton of ideas, and then let students sit and write. Or again, if you're kind of partially using a Google Classroom or the Canvas courses, then you might say, okay, go complete that online assignment. And that'll be great. Yeah. Yeah, and I popped that link right in the chat too. So that's the spot on the website where you'll find all the topics with the readings that we've put under each one. And every 2 or 3 years, we'll update the readings and or the topics so that they've got fresh material, because current events get outdated pretty quickly. Other questions, concerns, things that you feel like you might need that we haven't hit on yet? It's kind of an information dump in these first couple meetings with our PLCs, especially if you're new and you're already having to pivot and adjust constantly for this bizarre world that we live in. So if there's stuff we can give you to that's good. We can work on that.
I'm unclear as to the assembly of the portfolio. So this is our second week of classes. I've had all of my students set up a Google Docs folder for writing 121. I, of course, will have copies of the papers as they submit them to me in Google Classroom, but will I be pulling from my copies for the assembly of the portfolio, or will they be going back and submitting to me all of those items together and then I assemble them? What happens at the end?
I think it's up to you how you want to do it, right? So like, we do a portfolio capstone in 121 and 122, and we put it on the students to assemble the documents into one single PDF file. It's a little trickier if you're not doing everything digitally. If you're having students handwrite stuff, then you need to scan it. And you're responsible for figuring out how to scan and kind of put those things together. If you're having everything is being turned in digitally, it should be pretty easy to put that on the students, I would think, to piece those together. And then you can just kind of help double check that all the requirements are actually there and in the right order. The order should match the cover sheet, in other words, to the portfolio. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, I would say the majority of teachers that we work with do assign the sort of assembling of the portfolio to the students as kind of their final task.
Yeah.
I would strongly encourage you to put that on the student. And another thing too, like what we do in a typical school year is our final PLC, if we're back in person in spring, is what we call a collaborative grading day. And so that's actually time for you to come to the table with all of your student work and to work with faculty. If you have a question like, this is between a B and a C on the rubric, that you could actually pass that portfolio over to Lee and Casey to review. It's time to actually upload those student artifacts into our system in assigned grades. So we do hope that come May or June that we're back in person, hopefully, and that you all can spend that day with faculty, because our teachers really enjoy that time.
It is really helpful. And what we did in the spring, because we couldn't meet, a lot of teachers honestly just emailed me Google Docs from students saying, I think this is a 2, but could you give me your opinion on it to make sure I'm scoring it right? Or I think this is a 1 and is just passing, but I want to make sure. I zip those back really fast. And so if we can't meet in the spring because things are so crazy, Casey and I will set up some sort of Zoom open office hours, and you can just pop in and out to ask us questions, or you can email us papers. We'll figure a way out to help, because that first year of scoring is tough. I would say if you live near another teacher and you feel comfortable sitting together in a room but spread out or with a mask on, that some teachers find that really helpful, to sit together with a partner teacher and do your scoring together, so you can kind of talk through papers and kind of items on the rubric. We found that many of our teachers actually like to do that with a friend if you have somebody nearby.
I have a question about the syllabus and the course, the shell. So
Yep.
Katie sent us the 121, 122 shells. A lot of information in there, a lot of stuff in there.
Yes.
And so the course syllabus, I've only just started dipping my toes into it, but the course syllabus has the highlighted places. I assume that's where we personalize, but the rest of it needs to stay the same, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Except for sort of the scope and sequence pieces, that's kind of customizable. That's
you.
Okay.
Yep. So
And
you
then
need to, yeah.
do we just take that, like so I'm a newbie to Canvas, don't really know anything about it. So do we take that, then that course syllabus that we've customized, and we put it into our own teacher Canvas site? Is that right?
Well, oh, go ahead, Adam.
I'll probably be asking a lot of Canvas questions.
The syllabus that we require from you is a state requirement that we have to have a WU branded syllabus on file for you annually. There's no requirement on our end that syllabus finds its way into the Canvas shell. But one question I have as I'm sitting here just kind of brainstorming, listening, would it be helpful for just the Willamette Promise staff to put together a 30-45 minute training on how to edit things in Canvas, how to add, subtract, and all of that stuff?
Yeah, kind of how to set it up. I mean, I feel like, and I don't mean any disrespect at all, because everything you give me is fantastic, but I feel like there's been a lot of like Canvas, like I got an invitation to be a Canvas student, then I got an invitation to be a Canvas teacher, then I got an invitation. So I'm like, I'm not really sure how to make sense of it, because it's all poured into the same thing.
Yeah.
So just kind of trying to make sense of that as I go along. I went through and looked at the like help stuff that pops up on the right hand side of the screen, and I looked at some of that stuff, but it would be helpful to do a 20-30 minute training on those, especially for those of us. I mean, we could pick and choose whether we use it, but those of us who don't know Canvas, it would be really helpful, because I'd like to use it. It looks like a great platform. So I'd like to use it, but I just, either that or I'm going to be emailing you every other day.
No, Gail, that's super helpful feedback.
Yes.
So look for an invitation. We'll send it out, because it's not just writing that's piloting this. We have a couple other subject areas who are going to be sort of having Canvas shells for the first time. So I think we'll go ahead and schedule a couple different options to attend a training. And so look for that in the future, because that's really good feedback. Thank you, Gail.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks, guys.
And I would find it very helpful to have information on moving items from the Canvas shell into Google Classroom, because that is my mandated management system.
Yep, we'd be happy to talk about that too. Yeah.
I was going to say, my district mandated Google Classroom too, but I don't like it when they tell me what to do. So I'm doing what I want because this is through Woo. Power to the people.
Yes, and Casey and I very purposefully put way more than you might need into the Canvas courses. So there's definitely room for you to decide, I'm going to take these things out, or I'll keep these things, or I hate all of it and I would rather put this other stuff in. All of those are great options. Other questions or things you need, things we can clarify, resources that might help you get started?
One clarification that I will make, Lee and Casey, that was me volunteering to do a training, not me volunteering the two of you to do a training. I just want to clarify that.
That's great.
And Aaron, you hopped on late, just so you know, we did record, so we'll send it out to everyone who is here or not here, just so you all have this as a reference too.
Awesome. Thank you. I had a student sign in with a fake account to my Zoom and said some pretty inappropriate things, so I had to go deal with that. Second day today, guys. Second day.
I don't even know what to say. I'm just gonna mute myself. I'm sorry.
Was it you?
Yeah.
And I guess just so you guys know, I'm not teaching it till second semester.
That's
So Carrie Bloomquist is in my building, and she's going to be like my
Carrie's a rock star. So
Yeah.
yes, she will be such an awesome mentor. We love her.
Yeah. I'm lucky.
On the other comment that I was going to make, Gail, you had expressed, you know, we bring up Carrie's name. We do have a great group of veteran teachers, but you kind of hit on something that's super important, that we're all first year teachers this year because we've never started a year in comprehensive distance learning. So like even some of our most veteran kind of folks who've done this for 7-8 years now are still wrestling with some of the same concepts that you all are as you're getting your students to complete the portfolio and comprehensive distance learning. So it might not just be the veteran teachers that have some really good insights to offer this year. If we have some teachers who are really experienced with this kind of learning, that might be beneficial as well.
Yes, and depending on how you're delivering the course, I actually have been an online teacher for many years. I've taught online quite a fair bit and face-to-face. So if you find that you're getting to a point and what your question is how do I do this online? Feel free to email me, because I probably can point you to a bunch of resources and ideas to integrate it. There's, Canvas has a bunch of really cool apps that you can add into Canvas. Casey and I didn't do it because it just increased the learning curve for everybody. Like, Canvas was already going to be a challenge for many people, so we didn't add even more in. But there are lots of other cool, pretty easy texts that you can use or have students go to accomplish some of these things. So if you find that you're coming up with questions about specifically, how do I do this online or remotely, those are great things to shoot my way. You won't bother me, and I probably can point you to stuff to help you navigate that.
Anything else, folks? Because we won't keep you longer than we need to. All right.
Well, that
Lee,
last slide
Casey?
has our email addresses on it, and I reposted the link in the chat so that Aaron would get it. So I think everybody should have access to those slides. Those are our email addresses. Really, you can email absolutely anytime. It's completely fine. If you come up with other questions or you need help, just reach out and let us know. All right. Well, best of luck, everyone. I know this is going to be an absolutely crazy year.
True.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you all very much for attending. Hopefully this was helpful. And Lee, or Casey, any final comments or thoughts?
I don't think so.
I look forward to meeting you in person one day.
I know, someday.
Look forward to that.
All right. Take care, everyone. I will send out this recording, or Katie will send out this recording sometime this week.
Mhm.
All right. Bye,
All right,
everyone.
perfect.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.